much for agreeing to squeeze this interview in today. I know it's a big commitment for you, but I wondered if you would tell us where you were born, where you went to school, and what persuaded you to join up, and if we can go through that quickly.
Well, I was born in Cambridge Street in 1918, and we mostly lived in Onslow Road in Subiaco, where I went to Rosalie State School, and I got a scholarship to Perth Modern School, and I went there for, well, I had to leave in fourth year when, unfortunately, we ran out of money, and I got a job at 12 and 6 a week, and subsequently left that and went to, got a job with Girls Promote. In 1939, my cousin told me he had joined the Royal Air Force and I had a go at it. I was accepted subject to medical examination, but I failed the medical examination because I'm colourblind. By then it was 1940, and I decided to join the army, and I waited my call up, and I was called up on the 6th of August 1940. Went to subsequently the Northern Camp, where I was on a course, and Ted Lynham, the company commander of the 2nd 3rd Machine Company, John Don Company, came round looking for, they were increasing their numbers, I think by about 12, and I volunteered to join them.
Was this the 2nd 3rd Machine Company? Was he a colonel at that stage? Or?
No, he actually was a captain. He was. So then I joined the 2nd 3rd Machine Don Company of 2nd 3rd Machine Gun Battalion Northern. Later that year we would rail to Adelaide, where the battalion was concentrated. The battalion comprised of headquarters and company, A Company from South Australia, B Company from Victoria, C Company from Tasmania, and Don Company from Western Australia. We were firstly at Warradale, and then at Woodside, and it came for us to embark, and we were to get pre-embarkation leave.
Okay. Pre-embarkation.
From Woodside we went on pre-embarkation leave, and that was quite a trip. Nobody told us where to go or how to get there, and we were at this stage of the piece. Ted Lynham, the company commander, was in Perth, and it was decided that we had to make out leave passes, and everybody was supposed to get 6 days at home. Well, working that out from Adelaide as to whether we were all over the countryside, so we had established an idea that, I forget how many days it was, but I think everybody got about 10 days after we got to Perth. But working out when we would get to Perth was another thing, so we added a bit. And where we were going to assemble, well, leave passes used to leave at 23:59, which was a stupid time to get to anywhere. So we decided we'd have it at 10 o'clock, and we would assemble at the Claremont Showgrounds. They didn't know anything about it. Then somebody said the pubs didn't open until 10, we'd make it 11. So we made it 11 o'clock and had a session of an hour at the pub in Claremont, and turned up at the gates of the showground at 11 o'clock on this morning, and chaos assumed. I can remember a sergeant major, and he was red-headed, and he had bristly hair sticking up over his shirt, and I think it was sparkling. But Ding Middleton sorted things out.
What was his rank at that stage?
Ding was then lieutenant. We eventually got on a train and got to Northern at 11 o'clock that night. we spent a fair amount of time in waiting to be embarked, and that was when the Lynham long weekend eventuated. We found we could get our pay any day we called for it. So we got it on Thursday, and we were going to go on leave on Friday. And somebody said, why wait and not come back on Sunday? We'd come back on Monday. So that was, well, we were just sitting around waiting for something to happen. So that was where the Lynham long weekend came in, for which we were duly criticised, but who cared?
Yes.
We embarked on the Ile-de-France in April. That was about the 16th of April. I know it was just a few days after my birthday. And sailed on the Ile-de-France to the Middle East. Disembarked from there and went to Palestine Hill 95 camp. We were there for a few weeks, and then of course we went into Syria, or actually Lebanon it was, where we were on the coast, and were involved in our company was split into 3 platoons, each platoon to a battalion of the 21st Brigade as support. When the French surrendered, we moved to a recovery camp at a place called Marouge up in the mountains. Strangely enough, our battalion or company strength was 147 all ranks. At the end of the Syrian conflict, despite several reinforcements, there were 97 ranks left. We were subsequently reinforced, of course, up to full strength. From Marouge, we did field firing exercises, and went then to a small encampment north of Lebanon, where we were for Christmas 1941. Shortly after Christmas we were moved to Palestine at Hill 95, I think it was, and from there we were embarked on a tour to entrain for shipment. It was a series of snappers, unbelievable. They blew lights out at 9 o'clock and rebellion at 9:30. I mean, you couldn't believe it. And off we took. All our vehicles and guns and equipment had previously departed. We marched to this rail station in the middle of the night, cold as it could be too, and there we sat and waited. Trains were coming in and going out, and there were British military police there patrolling the place, and they had no kind words for you so-and-so Australians. Well, we realised that they were trying to make certain we didn't pillage anything off the trains. So the next train that came in, we whizzed the case open, and there were cases of beer. And the case of beer came out and was covered with it, and the MPs come running up, but we had it all covered with gear, and that was fine, you see. And eventually, we got on a train. Well, the case of beer must have got on the truck next to us. Of course, going over the Sinai Desert, they ripped it open and found it was tomato sauce. And the whole lot got thrown out. We got to Kantara, where you had bangers and mash, morning, breakfast, lunch and dinner. They served that. They could serve it as you ran through. We went across the canal to Kantara. Of course, it's spelt with a Q on one side and a K on the other, and got on this train, and the engine broke down. And there we sat, and eventually got to a camp that night where we had a mess. And first thing next morning, we set off to go to the ship. A truck came and took all our packs off us. Took all our kit bags to start with. Two kit bags. And then they came and took our packs off us, and we then ran, or marched at the double to get to the port. There was a stack of our packs. "Take one and run," said Jack Rymal, Sergeant Major. I could see WX7433 sticking up, and I grabbed that. And off we got onto this ship, completely exhausted, and crashed, and we were told to go to A deck aft. Shortly after that, they were told we could go and withdraw and get our kit bags. Well, we went down, and the kit bags we went to had AANS on them, Australian Army Nursing Services. We never saw our kit bags again. Well, the Orchids just set sail. They actually cut the hawsers with an axes, and off we went, heading for Australia. Well, one morning the sun came up on the starboard side instead of the port, and we were heading north. Shortly after we got into Sundra Straits, we didn't realise where we were, of course. Nobody ever told us anything. And we got ready to disembark. We disembarked that afternoon onto an oil tanker. I remember an oil tender, covered in oil too, and got alongside at Oosthaven. It was late afternoon, and I can remember a British brigadier, I think he was, stood on the wharf and said, "What in the hell are you doing here? Get the hell out of the place. The Japs are 6 miles away and there's nothing between us." By this time it was dark, and we signalled the Orchids, and they didn't want to reply. And we went through, and we actually Morse coded the personal names of the crew and things like that to identify, and eventually they put 3 lights up, red over blue over green, or something similar. Being colourblind, I didn't see it, but we saw the lights, and we got back onto the ship. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd managed to get myself a sweet little job on the trip, in charge of a working party associated with the purser, who pulled me aside as we came ashore, and he said, "Singapore surrendered last night, come with me." And we went down to his cabin with a little group and knocked off a bottle of scotch. The Orchids then sailed along the coast of Java, and by the grace of God, cloud was at mast height, and we could hear planes over the top of us. And we got to Batavia, Tanjong Priok, which was then in Batavia, and anchored. And then we were told we were anchored on a minefield and to shift. And we eventually came alongside. Well, there was General Wavell and a heap of staff waving their arms and talking, and we were told to disembark. So we disembarked in the morning, and there on the wharf were a flotilla of people with cameras, and this really worried us about our security. Well, we got back onto the ship. We were shortly told to disembark again in different gear. Now, we got off that ship 5 times and got back 4 times, each time in different gear at different time of the day at night. Eventually, in the middle of the night, we got off and we went to the Kamai Rail Airport. And I can remember we slept where we dropped. And we found that in the morning we were in horse stables. Fortunately, the horses hadn't been there for some time. And the local paper came out, and there were pages and pages of Australian troops landing at various ports in Java. They were all us. We were there at the airport for only a few days, really. It got bombed by 27 Japanese one time, and amazingly, no damage was done, but one of our members was injured, and he was taken back to the Orchids, and he's still with us. Shortly after that, we went to a place called Boitenzorg, which was a lovely park, and we camped there overnight, and went up then to Lewiliang, where we engaged the Japanese. Well, about 4 days we were there, ran out of everything. A brigade of Dutch troops were to take over from us, and Don Company had the nice job of being the rear guard. They took over from us. We were walking down the road to our trucks, and the Dutch brigade came roaring out and left us to it. We took off, heading for what we thought was Tlautjap. But in the meantime, of course, the Dutch surrendered, and we finished up at the tea plantation at Arenum. We were there for some days, and eventually we went to the place called Glelis prison camp. It was a marketplace. We were there for some week or so or two, and then went to Garut, which was an old school. We were in Garut for some months, and then went to the Bandong camp, which was a concentration, and that's where I first saw Weary Dunlop. Wondered why he got called Weary, and they said Dunlop Tyres was his nickname. I had very little to do with him because I was fortunately not in need of medical attention. Eventually, later that year, we were assembled and went to a place called Makasura, from where we were taken in January to the port of Tanjong Priok and got on a ship loaded like sheep or cattle down into the holds, and were shipped to Singapore. We got off in Singapore, and at that stage of the piece, the clothes we had were the previous summer's equipment, and was badly worn by then, of course. Some of our men didn't have boots. We got to Changi, where we were hardly welcomed, and that's where we got the name of the Java Rebel, because we were ill-equipped. We were there for 10 days, and then we entrained to Thailand, or it was Siam, of course, in those days. We got onto a lot of trucks at Ban Pong, and all the trucks had a heap of bananas on board, which we ate. We found later on they were the day's rations. We were trucked over the river, and then we marched to what's now Tarso.
Do you have any idea how many days it was from the time you left Ban Pong to the time that you were, I think it's called Tardan, where you crossed the river?
The same day.
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
being on trucks, yes.
On trucks,
yes,
and
yeah.
we got to Tarso,
Yeah.
and we were put in a little area there and told not to come out of it and things like that, but there was nothing there for us.
Mm.
And then they took us the next day, marched us to Konyu. Konyu was nothing. There wasn't anything there at all. It was just a bit of jungle. We had to clear the jungle for somewhere to sleep. And over the next few weeks we built our huts, things like that. We'd only just got this camp set up when they shifted us to Hentock, at that what we call the road camp. I believe it's now called the mountain camp area. And there we were, and that would be in March. And we started then working on the railway line.
And what was your role working on the line? What were you doing?
I was in the hammer and tap gang.
Hammer and tap.
Yeah. Well, we started off working, forming formation, carrying dirt in baskets and hammers and things like that. They used to give us a job to do for the day, and they'd set up lines as to how much formation had to be filled for the day. And if we filled it too soon, they shifted the lines, the lines up. It was shortly after that that we got onto the formation of the cuttings, and got onto a hammer and tap gang. That had its advantages. It was pretty hard work, but we were able to finish earlier than others, because after they'd fired all the holes we drilled, we were dismissed, which was sometimes a little earlier than others, which gave us the opportunity of getting back to camp in daylight. I can remember we pinched some fracture and went fishing, and caught fish. They were funny little fish. They were the boniest fish I've ever seen. Yeah, so there we were in, we seemed to get ourselves into little groups of mates. And our group comprised Jimmy Allpike, Colin Trigwell, and Harry, I can't think his other name. He was a Queenslander, and he was Tom Uren's mate on the hammer and tap gang. Just how we sort of got to that way we did.
Was it Harry Baker by any chance?
Could have been Harry Baker, but I can only remember Harry. Now, the conversation was mainly about food and what we were going to have when we got home. And Harry was the one with the oysters, a large plate of oysters. His ideas. Ours was taken eggs and tomatoes and so that was that. And then we were shifted down to the river camp, and there we built the three-tier bridge.
So you walked up from the river to do the three-tiered bridge?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we did it from both ends actually, but halfway through we went back. At this stage of the piece, of course, the cholera
I was just going to ask.
was very prevalent.
Yeah. It was Corlett in that camp at that stage?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Corlett was both at the mountain camp, as they call it, the road camp, and down at the and Moon.
Yes.
There was
that was before Moon went
Dunlop,
down.
Moon, and Corlett.
Yes.
Were the three doctors.
Where was Godley while this was all going on?
Don't know where Tim got to. He was with us, but fortunately I didn't have to have much contact with doctors.
Yes. Can I just ask, did you know of a medical orderly called Ray Denny who was from the 2nd Pioneers?
Well, I knew some medical orderlies there, but I didn't know their names.
No, okay.
And they were conscientious and dedicated people. The medical orderlies were. We used to get a day off in camp. Yeah, somebody got it, and it was in the height of the cholera season, and Arthur Withnell, sergeant, and myself were the two day labourers cutting firewood. We created 17 cholera victims that day, carting wood for that. They were from a British group that were hopeless. They had got that fire, and I'm diverting here a bit. Poor buggers, they didn't know even how to light a fire. I can remember something that's saying that the first time they ever saw the ocean was when they embarked on the ship. And so they couldn't look after themselves, and the cholera just got to them in a big way. I got a pair of boots out of it. But Arthur Withnell said to me that after we'd had lunch he didn't feel too well, and he went down to the RAP and died of cholera that night. That was WX4000.
Yes.
My wife asked me the worst day I ever had in my prison camp day, and that would have been it.
And that was at Hintock River Camp, was it?
And no, Hintock Road.
Right.
Shortly after we went to the Hintock River Camp, we were building mainly building the three-tier bridge. I got, when they put the bridge together, had 5x10 mortars and tenons for the bedders and sitters. When they went to assemble, of course, they didn't fit. And there was a 3-inch chisel, I think it was the only one on the job, and I happened to have my hand on it at the right time, and I got the job of paring down the tenons. And I had a death grip on that 3-inch chisel, and I remember, I think it was Bill Haskell who christened me the leading hand carpenter. It was shortly after that, I don't know whether it had anything to do with it at all, but I was called off the work parade this morning, and the Japanese interpreter bloke said to me, "You carpenter." And I got a job in the camp as in the what they call the carpenter shop, but we were falling trees, splitting them up and paring them down and making axe handles and hand timber handles. Well, I hadn't heard of Parkinson's law in those days, but I put it into effect. We had to have an assistant. And I said we had a good saw man, so the next day my mate Jimmy Allpike joined us. And then Tom from Tasmania, he got in. Bram O'Mara was another one of our friends. We got a job and we finished up with quite a group of us. But the classic one was Bill, I can't think of his name all of a sudden, but he'd been a tin mining engineer, and there was a tailor mending clothes, and he was making an awful. We said we had a good tailor, and the next day he joined us as a tailor, repairing clothes. Well, shortly after that we were shifted to Kenneth, and we thought, well, the good times had finished. But they reassembled us into the carpenter shop at Kenneth, which means we were close onto the river and had access to Thai traders, which was, of course, forbidden. Kenneth, it was there that they called for a blood donor, and they had to be 04. Well, of course, we were. The British troops didn't have their things. And so I was called off the work parade, taken to this little hospital, I suppose you could call it that. And there was this chap, Snuffy Craic. He was a bit of a comedian in his day too, and a pretty sick bloke. Anyway, they lay me down and put a needle in my arm, and obviously another one, and they took 10 cc's, they called it in those days, 10 millilitres now, out of my arm and pumped it into his. And I think they had 2 syringes. They filled one on my arm and emptied the other one there. It took quite some time, and I understand that they took 400 millilitres of blood out of my arm and pumped it into, and Snappy Craic sat up.
And who was the doctor that was doing this?
There were 3 doctors there then.
Yeah.
It was Pavillard, and that was the first time I ever saw him. Ewan Corlett was there, and Tim Godley. And they had a big discussion as to whether this was going to work. They were very, very doubtful, because they said everybody, and I can remember, the comment was that we had so much org in our veins, and they said, well, everybody has, so we're not going to give him anything he hasn't got, sort of thing. And they held the blood up, and I can remember watching it and to see if it matched or something or other, and away they went. So they weren't interested in me at all.
Did you ever see any of the concerts that Snappy Craic was involved with?
Oh yes. They were completely absorbed with Craic, which is probably right. And one of the medical orderlies got hold of me and told me to put a bandage on my arm and told me to lie there for an hour before I got up. Well, I don't know how you worked out an hour, but I lay there and eventually got up and walked away, and that was that. Frankly, I never ever thought any more about it. I'd been a blood donor in 7 lives. So, Kinsiak, we had relatively easy time there because of being in the carbon shop, and the work wasn't that bad. It was mainly chopping firewood for the engines and filling them with water and things, all done at night time, of course. Then they shifted us to Rin Tin, and we were working much, a little bit of maintenance, but we were only there for a few weeks, I think. Shifted us back to Kinsiak.
While you're at Rintin, did you have any contact? I understand there were quite a lot of Dutch in that area.
Yes, they were.
Did you have any contact?
Not
with
a
them?
great deal. Pretty hazy about Rintin. I've really come to think of it, pretty hazy about everything there. Off we went to, then they shifted us down to Tamwan. And we went over that big bridge. I was somewhat apprehensive because I knew how I'd pared down the tents. And we went slowly and the whole thing rocked, and you could see it was all melted. But the main problem was the what do you call it, the ash from the engine. And the sparks, and we had to keep the sick blokes there where they kept putting the fire out on them. We got to over the bridge, Tamakan, and it was in the middle of the night, and we got off and we sat on the side of the railway line until daylight. Hang on, I'm getting mixed up here. Tamwan, that's right, we got to Tamwan, that was a different story together. And in Tamwan, we re-established the carpenter shop. We were mainly making shovels out of 44-gallon drums. That went on for some time, and then the Japan party was being assembled. And there we were lined up, and I think it was a bloke in a white coat. Somebody said that he was supposed to be a doctor. And I had a acute dose of malaria. And I'm sitting there shivering with Rigo. Whoosh, he said. So I was off the Japan party. Well, in that stage the workshop had been disbanded and we were just involved in anything that was going. It was shortly after that that they assembled us to go up to Conquita. Heck Griner was in charge of us there. I think there were 200 of us in the group. So we went to Conquita and it was mainly on rail maintenance. And I jokingly said to Heck Griner one day, it'd be a great place to be the camp butcher because we hadn't seen meat for weeks. Well, Heck wasn't noted for his sense of humour. And out of the blue, it must have been a week later or something like that, he said to me, "You want to be the camp butcher? Well, you are." And I'd never butchered a thing in my life. But I had to make a set of yards for some cattle that were going to arrive, and they duly arrived hog-tied on a flat-top truck. One was dead, but was still warm. Now we ate that, and the other three, we had to carry them down to this yard, and that's how big they were. And I got the job of looking after them. Oh, look, I can tell all sorts of hilarious experiences that happened there. There was a nice creek in that, it was dammed up, we dammed it up and made it things like it. Every wall of the washing was below that. And it rained one night, and now I don't know what the hell, oh that's right, we had to have fires because of the tigers, keep the tigers away, and put them out when the planes came over. B-52s, they called them. B-51s. So, I don't know what possessed me, but there was all mud around there, and I made time contracts with my hand. When a Jap came down and saw these and ran screaming back. And anyway, the first thing that had to be killed was a pig. That was for the Japs. And I had to have an assistant, and I can't think of his name now, Charlie somebody or other. And he was a slaughterman from in Sydney. And between us we slaughtered this pig, and the head was ours and the skin was ours and the hide and things like that. And we chopped it up and cut the head off at level with the shoulder blades. So we cleaved the carcass and then cut it into four, and he carefully dissected a rib out each. We took the 4 pieces up to the cookhouse and we thanked for it and things like that. We had a beaut chop, but I think we got about 4 gallons of fat out of the hides and things. Anyway, like all good things, that came to an end and we shipped it down to, that was when we shipped it down overnight to camp at the river.
Not Chongkai?
No.
Tamakan.
Tamakan. And that's where we got there at 2 o'clock in the morning,
yes.
or in the middle of the night. But at Conquita, there were wild growth of garlic there, and we had lots of garlic. So when we got to Tamakan, we smelled of garlic, and they reckon they could smell us coming. We were there for some time, and that was when they bombed the bridge. They set fire to our hut in the meantime and burnt everything I had.
So did you come across the 2nd, 4th machine gunner, Dr. Claude Anderson, in that camp?
That's where Claude was, yes. That's what I did. We caught up with Claude. I was a patient of his in Stirling Highway when we lived in Nedlands.
Yes.
I think I had some boils on my neck or something or other. Anyway, there we were for some time until they shifted us one night we got onto a barge and went down the river and finished up in Bangkok on the wharfs there in the go downs of them. We got in this thing where there was a huge heap of sand in it, which was lovely to lie on, and then we found it was covering an unexploded bomb. Well, from there they shifted us, and we got on the top of a train, walked for days and days. They walked us for 36 hours, I think, was the time. And we went to Nakombaton.
Oh, non-competent, yes.
And there we were for, it was roughly there in Prachaburi, working, and then we started digging tunnels into the side of the hill. We came back to camp one night, one afternoon, and there were 4 machine guns mounted on each corner of the thing. This was in a paddy field, it was pretty mucky. And then they marched us out to work digging these tunnels into the side of the hill.
And was that at Nakomiok?
Yeah. We wondered what the hell they were for. They said they're going to be storage, but the water was running in the damn things. And then one morning we went out, and there was an officers group used to park us, and the Japs used to run in between us, no talkie, no talkie. And we stopped about 50 yards after them, and they stopped down there, and we had a little, what they called yasmi, on the walk out. And the next thing they moved us back, and we went past these things, and they said to us, what's going on? There was no talkie or anything. And we finished up, and that was the day the war finished. We got back to camp, and it was announced that the war had finished.
You didn't have any experience like someone parachuting into your camp?
Oh yes, that was subsequent. We did too. There was a American sergeant parachuted into the camp, and the first bloke that he saw, he gave him a $10 note. That he, of course, was in radio contact, and the next thing, Dakotas came in with they dropped supplies to us. We were there for some weeks, of course, until they sorted things out. But we got clothes, food, and Lady Blamey, and on 2 roads turned up. No, it wasn't Lady Mountbatten. And the camp was sort of divided off. If you had clothes, you could be seen. If you didn't, you couldn't. And they were guiding her around the place, but of course she wouldn't stay guided, and she got onto the place where the blokes without pants had. And I can remember the heap of them. You could see bare bottoms flying over the wall, getting out of the road of the Lady Blamey. They shifted us to Bangkok, and I had a dose of malaria that day. Mind you, you had them all the time, but being with rampant malaria, I got on a bus. Unfortunately, the bus broke down, and I finished up into Bangkok, and it rained, of course. Finished up into Bangkok late afternoon, evening. They took me off the back of the truck. And laid me on a blanket. Next day they weighed me, and I was 8 stone 2. And, well, we eventually got home. From there on it was, pretty nice. We've flown out of Bangkok. We had to wait for the weather. And we waited at the airport, I think, for probably about 10 days before we could get. But when we were in the Kompoton Pampa, there was a truck there left behind the Japanese, which we sold. some smart entrepreneur sold the spare wheel for about as much as a truck. And we had a bag full of toy money, which was, you know, toys to us. And that came home with us, and it was kicked around on the ship. First we flew to Singapore, got out of Singapore in the middle of the day, and some bloke was shaking our hands and looked up and he had as much brass on him. He was a general of some sort. Well, we were in camp there, and there we met up with one of our former cooks, who are now Lofty. Actually, Lofty got left behind in South Australia, but there he was, a caterer with a warrant officer's badge. I think he was a Lance Corporal. Well, we met up with him, and of course he had all the good things in the world, so we did pretty well there. Then we were shipped out onto the Highland Chieftain hospital ship, and that's where I met up with Harry from Queensland. We got to Brisbane, and Harry grabbed me, and that's where we had that dish of a large plate of oysters. He complained that it wasn't large, and the waitress put her hands on her hips and said, "It is a large plate. There's been a war on, you know." Anyway, we went down to Sydney, and then by train from there across to Perth. It's pretty boring from there on, because we just eventually got, well, of course we were admitted to Hollywood Hospital, 42 of us in one day. The 8K's got the beds, and the LZ's got the veranda, and and that's where they dosed us up with carbon tetrachloride to kill the hookworm, and that was the quickest drunk you could ever get, but we survived. I was in the Hollywood Hospital for over the next 2 or 3 months, I think, and eventually discharged in February '46, and eventually got back to work.
Ken, I know we've got another commitment, but there are 2 questions I'd like to ask you about. You did mention to me that you assisted Tim Godley with a particular operation. Do you remember?
Oh, that was at Conquita.
Right.
He did 2 operations, perforated esophagus. And it was done in the open, of course. Well, there wasn't anything else. But they had a 4-gallon can that I put on a fire, boiled it up, and that was the steriliser. And that was my little role there.
Then what did they use for an anaesthetic, do you know?
I've no idea.
No, okay.
I don't know what they used for anaesthetic.
And did the fellow recover?
One, he actually had 2 operations. Unbelievable, because he'd never seen them before.
Yes.
And one survived, but one did not. And it was shortly after that they railed us back down to Tamarkan. And yes, well, that Tim Godley was at Conquita.
Yeah. Did you see any of his other work?
Not really, no.
Do you remember a medical sergeant by the name of Red Sheedy?
Yes.
All? Yeah. Did you have any contact with him?
Well, probably did, but I can't remember anything specific about. But I remember Red Sheedy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Ken, I think we might have to wrap it there.
Well, thank you.
Can I say how much I appreciate you giving me the time, and I know we're squeezing it in, but thank you so much.
Well, it's been a pleasure.